House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at the end of Trump's address, sitting right behind him and ripping up her copy of the speech in two. Immediately afterwards, reporters caught up with her as she left the House chamber.
Madam Speaker, what did you think of Trump's speech tonight?
I tore it up.
Why did you rip the speech up, Madam Speaker?
Because it was the courteous thing to do, considering the alternative.
Zing! Now, as you may remember, the Republican Party then immediately fell into this hysterical pearl clutching over standards of decency and decorum, which was pretty rich, given the standards of decency and decorum generally observed by the sitting Republican president. But when Donald Trump himself was asked about it a couple days later, he took it even further.
Well, I thought it was a terrible thing when she ripped up the speech. First of all, it's an official document. You're not allowed. It's illegal what she did. She broke the law.
It's illegal. She broke the law. That happened 2 years ago today. And friends, those comments have not aged well. Now, first of all, in case this needs clarifying, Nancy Pelosi did not break the law. But there is someone with a well-known history of actually destroying official presidential records. Politico was the first to report back in 2018 that President Trump had a habit of ripping up documents, and that federal government records specialists found themselves rescuing Trump's hand-shredded papers and trying to scotch tape them back together, even some that were torn into confetti-sized pieces. Because there is a law, the Presidential Records Act, requiring that, as you know, presidential records be properly preserved and stored by the National Archives. Sure enough, when the January 6th investigation started receiving Trump White House records that Trump had fought for months to block them from getting, some of them had indeed been ripped up and taped back together. And this week, the Washington Post reported that, quote, Trump's shredding of paper was far more widespread and indiscriminate than previously known. Throughout his presidency, staffers made a habit of coming in behind Trump to retrieve the piles of torn paper left in his wake and then, quote, jigsawing the documents back together with tape. And it went beyond just tearing things up. Quote, one senior Trump White House official said he and other White House staffers frequently put documents into burn bags to be destroyed rather than preserving them, and would decide themselves what should be saved and what should be burned. When the January 6th committee asked for certain documents related to Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Mike Pence, for example, some of them no longer existed in this person's files because they had already been shredded, end quote. A former senior Trump official said of Trump, quote, he didn't want a record of anything. Now, I guess one simple, straightforward way to describe that might be this.
It's an official document. You're not allowed. It's illegal what she did. She broke the law.
Donald Trump apparently also took a whole bunch of presidential records with him when he left the White House and just stuck them at his golf club in Florida. The Washington Post reports today that the National Archives had to go retrieve 15 boxes of records from Mar-a-Lago that should have been turned over when Trump left the White House. And the National Archives says that Trump's staff are, quote, continuing to search, end quotes, for additional records that may have been thrown into Trump's U-Haul when he left the White House for Mar-a-Lago. The Post and now the New York Times both report that the contents of the 15 boxes include correspondence between Trump and the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, as well as a letter that President Obama left for Trump when Obama left office. According to the Times tonight, also in the boxes is, amazingly, this, the National Weather Service map that he altered with a Sharpie during a hurricane briefing in 2019. Now, you will recall that he used a Sharpie to change the projected path of a hurricane in order to match what he had incorrectly said about the hurricane's path in a tweet. Dear Leader's tweet obviously couldn't be wrong, so an entire weather system had to be altered by Sharpie to match it. Yes, that Sharpie-gate map definitely belongs in the National Archives. We need a record of it, mostly because the people of the future will not believe that something so ridiculous ever happened. As for how those 15 boxes end up at Mar-a-Lago instead of at the National Archives, the Times reports that it happened during a hasty exit from the White House when, instead of packing up like a president planning to leave office in accordance with the law should have been, quote, Mr. Trump had spent the bulk of the presidential transition trying to find ways to stay in power. At the time, Mr. Trump's aides were either preoccupied with helping him overturn the election, trying to stop him, or avoiding him.